1. I live with my partner and roommate, both of which are really into paranormal YouTube channels and shows. This is something they bond over. My roommate even has some tools that he has used, even in our own house that is over a century old. I, on the other hand, have an appreciation for it, but I'm not as into it as they are. I'm also more skeptical than they are. Not to say that I don't believe it, because I absolutely do, but I try to look at things from an objective point of view. With that being said, a few months ago, I am pretty sure I encountered a ghost cat. My partner and I have 3 cats. I work from home and have been dubbed the crazy cat lady. So the cats and I are all very attuned to one another. It began with me thinking I see one of our cats out of the corner of my eye, but when I look, nothing is there. I then begin to see the cat figure walk around out of the corner of my eye. This is when I was introduced to the second ghost cat. One of them looks to be black or dark, while the other looks white. I have never seen both cats at the same time. We have a white cat with gray markings, a brown tabby, and a black and white tuxedo. Sometimes the ghost cats would do things like my cats would normally do, so I chalked it up to being a muscle memory thing. Kind of like I am used to them being there, so I feel like they're there. Until a few weeks ago, I was laying in bed when I thought I saw our white and gray spots cat dart across our room, something she would absolutely do. But when I sat up to talk to her, I didn't see her. I laid back down to see a white cat dart across the room the other way, up into a bedroom window, and I heard scratching and tapping at the window, something my cat would not do. I slowly sat up, thinking it had to be my cat, only to see nothing. I try telling myself that it's the muscle memory thing, but I couldn't get myself to believe that. I feel like it was white ghost cat. Because of the amount of minor encounters, I decided to bring it up to my partner and roommate. My partner says that he thinks he's seen them too, but he's too afraid to believe it because he feels like it's a bad entity trying to disguise itself as something innocent. I don't believe this whatsoever. My roommate thinks that I'm just so used to the cats that I'm overthinking it. This was super disheartening because I don't feel like I'm being overdramatic. I really believe I can feel them. I knew I had to make this post because not only were their comments eating me up inside, but just a little bit ago, I had a second encounter with one of them. I think black ghost cat touching me. I will sit at my desk to work, and oftentimes my cats will come and rub up on my legs. Then I'll reach down to pet them. A few weeks ago when this happened and I reached down to feel no cat, I thought it was the chair or my pant leg that just tricked me. But it just happened again. Now I feel fully convinced there is a black ghost cat and a white ghost cat that live in my house. My cats have never acted strangely towards them, which is another reason I don't believe they are bad entities disguised. I also think it could be one ghost cat, but I absolutely have seen both a black and a white one, but never together. Thoughts? Am I being dramatic? Is this valid? 2. So this is an experience I had in 2018, when I was a management trainee with an organization, and it entailed a short 1 or 2 week stint across their major offices in different cities. Our office organized for accommodation for us too. For my second stint, I was put in a city where I had never been before, and had no friends or acquaintances. So the company booked a hotel close to the office premises. The room was rather big and seemed very luxurious, albeit a bit old and shabby. What stumped me the most was how economical it was. The first night was uneventful, and for a woman traveling alone for the first time, it felt secure and comfortable. The second night, at about 9:30 p.m., I ordered in, and after finishing my dinner, I went out of my door to place the food trolley for collection by the staff. Just when I turned around to close my door, I saw someone staring at me from the corner of my eye. The person was at the end of the corridor, and it was very dimly lit. Let me add here that only 2 out of the 20 rooms on the floor were occupied, and 10 were being renovated, hence the dim lighting at night. When I turned to look, the person ran out of view towards the elevator. I was creeped out and locked the room and reported this to the reception. Third night. I was talking to my mom on a video call and heard heavy pacing and running at about 10 or 10:30 p.m. My mama heard it too. I sneaked to the peephole and saw no one, but I heard the footsteps right outside my door. Called the reception and they sent someone to check, who reported that there was no one, and I checked their CCTV footage. No one was there. Fourth night. I got a call on the hotel intercom, and when I answered, I heard only heavy breathing and low growling noises. This continued another 2 times before I called the reception again to raise a complaint. They checked their call panel records and said I had not received calls from any current hotel guest or staff lines. I checked again the next morning, just to be sure, and they showed how the system is automated, and no one can tamper with it. It showed no incoming or outgoing calls from my room. Fifth night. Heard a constant knocking on a wall behind the bed, and it moved across the room. Bases where I was standing. This creeped me out much more, and as someone diagnosed with hyperanxiety and depression, it felt like I was losing my mind and I got an anxiety attack. I ran out of the room to the reception, 2 floors below, and the manager on duty calmed me down, and I was extremely upset. I questioned everyone around, and none of the staff said anything, and said it was strange such things were happening. Later, a woman from my hometown, who was currently employed there, accompanied me to a new room they assigned me to. She told me in private that floor I was on had been sealed for 5 years and had recently been opened. A rumor has it that some old hotel staff had molested a woman and she was killed in the struggle. The administration covered it up and paid off the perpetrator and family of the victim, and sold this property to the current owners. Since then, people have reported multiple occurrences on that floor. Also, these were major events. Some other small things happened, like the feeling of being watched constantly, cold spots and feelings of nausea and panic. I checked out promptly the next morning and got another hotel, paid from my pocket, and have since then been extremely scared and anxious to be alone in any hotel room. 3. I'll try to keep it to the point and not drift off too much, but I swear on everything this is a true story of my own experience. When I was 12 and 13, I lived with my aunt for a few years with my younger cousin. We lived in a little house on a dead-end road in a small town of about 500 people. We were technically considered a village. My aunt was an odd soul. Everyone has their own rhythm, and hers was a different rhythm for sure. She had a fascination with the odd and the strange. From a musical, dancing, miniature jester figurine to old newspapers from the 20s. Then enter her collection of porcelain masks, of which she had more than 30 of. All different sizes and styles, and she had them all over her bedroom walls. The house we lived in was small but cozy, but this house had other paranormal events happen in it before and after the events of this story take place. So it was no big deal when small stuff would happen because we were odd. So some stuff being harmless was fine by us. None of what happened before or after was harmful. This was the only event I was actually stricken with pure fear. It was my 13th birthday, and for my birthday I wanted us all to watch a horror movie together, because those are my favorite kind, still to this day. We watched A Haunting in Connecticut as the chosen movie. It was my aunt and uncle, their 3 kids, my 2 friends, and myself there to watch it. After the movie, we all just kinda crashed, so I went to my aunt's room to sleep because it was the only other room with a TV. One of those old box TVs that would go full static every now and again. I get in there and put something on quietly and go to sleep, but I wake up a couple hours later, and the room is pitch black other than the light from the static on the TV, which, if you know, is not very much. It's basically a straight low beam that makes some stuff visible, but everything outside that vicinity gets harder and harder to see. But I can see her masks clearly. I went to get up to change the channel, and I noticed I couldn't move. It was like some sort of sleep paralysis. My eyes could move, but my body couldn't, so I just lay there briefly, trying to wait for my body to realize, when I heard a sound like someone tapping their nails on the closet door. Just like a little foretap I'm sure we all do when we're bored. But it caught my attention, and I fixed my eyes on the closet door, waiting to hear it again. Within about a minute, I glanced to the wall that the closet was on, at my aunt's masks, when I noticed one was missing. And I knew because it was the one I had gotten her for Mother's Day. I did a double take because I knew where it was always hung. I didn't pay too much mind to it until I had looked back at the TV. I could barely see the missing mask that was missing off the wall, now barely out of light behind the TV. I knew it was the mask by the little pink flower pattern on the left cheek. At first I thought my aunt had moved it, but no longer than I had that thought, the mask started to raise very, very slowly, raising to the ceiling and slowly making its way to directly over my face in the bed, where it stayed for a couple of seconds before slowly descending to what felt like right over my face. I tried to close my eyes, but it didn't help. I couldn't scream. It was just like the enormous pressure being pushed at me. I could feel it looking at me and could practically see it doing it with my eyes closed. Then out of nowhere, the pressure lifted, and I heard the mask break from falling. It fell directly about where it originally hung by the closet. I laid there practically in tears, not able to do anything about it. Then it sounded like someone shaking the bedroom door as hard as possible, trying to get in, but it wasn't locked. My aunt and uncle woke up to the sound of the door shaking, and came to see what they thought I was doing, till they got in front of the door, and it swung open on its own. As soon as the door opened, it was like my body woke up, and I sat up and screamed as loud as possible, and pushed to the corner in the bed crying. That's when I told them what happened. They knew by the way I was acting that I wasn't kidding, and they would have probably doubted it a bit had it not been for the door opening on its own. But that's the end of this one. I have many more others than this one. 4. Back in high school, my friends wanted to go to this abandoned paper mill from the 1800s one night, and they invited me to join them. I thought might as well. I had nothing planned that night, so I told them I would meet them at the gas station, and I'll follow them to the mill. There were 4 of them in the car, and I was jamming behind them listening to my music. Also, I had no clue about this building we were going to. All I knew was that it was an abandoned mill. Anyways, we arrive. It was a super long drive, but once we were there, we got in by sliding onto the fence, where there's a hole. Guessing kids made it a while back. It's pretty dark out, so we needed to use our flashlights to look around. Since I stepped foot in the building, I felt like I was being watched. It didn't feel like any bad energy, though, just the feeling of something there watching me as I walked through this old mill. One of my friends suggested we go to the basement, and so we all carefully make our way down these old steps to the basement. We're looking, and there's a long corridor that is super dark to the right, and a giant room at the bottom of the steps. And I'm still feeling like I'm being watched, but once I was in the basement, it was so strong. I felt like whoever was watching me was in the basement. One of my friends pointed out a pentagram on the wall, saying a devil mark, and I pipe up mentioning it could also be a mark for protection. My mom knew some things, and I guess she would talk about these symbols around me growing up. After looking for a little bit, we all branch off to different parts of the basement. A couple went towards another room they found, and I walked towards the dark corridor, where I felt something staring at me since I walked in the room. As I'm walking closer, the feeling keeps growing stronger, and I know 100% this is where it's coming from. I walk a little bit into the corridor and turn my flashlight off so I can be in total darkness. And once I turn it off, I see what I can only guess was a worker of the mill, and he's staring at me. He was probably 40s or 50s, and I could only see him from his waist up. I only saw him for a second, but I can feel his energy right in front of me. And after this guy has just been watching me this whole time, like a hungry guy at a bar, I decided to say something, and I said, "You know I can see you, right?" Which I technically couldn't see him, but I did for 1 second, so we can call that a win. Anyways, right after I say that, I feel satisfied I said my piece. I turned to leave, and right behind me was one of my friends who was standing there looking right at me. He asked who I was talking to, and just replied with no one, as I usually talk to myself, and It's normal for me to talk randomly. Anyways, a little later we leave the mill and go back to one of our friends' houses. And there the friend who was behind me asked again about the corridor, and I spilled the beans. I told my friends I felt someone watching me the entire time we were there, and I told them about when we got to the basement, and how it felt like it was a worker, and how he was watching me, and the looks on their faces changed from amused to confusion and a little denial. My friend says that on the drive to the mill they were talking about how it is haunted and how a worker died there from an accident. But I had no idea that it was haunted because I was driving behind them in another car, and they didn't mention it when we got there. Anyways, it was pretty funny to see their faces and give them a little scare, but I definitely changed their thought of spirits that night. 5. During either my junior or senior year of high school, my dad moved into a new house after a divorce from my ex-stepmom. I had 2 younger siblings between the 2 of them, a younger brother and a younger sister. Since I lived with my mom a majority of the time during high school and stayed on campus during my first college semester, I shared a room in this house with my Anna, my younger sister, who is about 9 years younger than me. Alex, my younger brother by 6 years, had his own room down along the hall. This incident takes place in the upstairs hallway. For context, the hallway comes off from the kitchen. Going down it, you'll pass us kids' bathroom on the left with Alex's bedroom door across from it on the right. Continuing down, the hallway ends in a small square, with the entrances to Anna and I's room, and Dad's room sitting catty-corner to each other. I hope that's not too confusing. One night, the summer before I started college, I was coming home late from a date with my at-the-time boyfriend. It was about 2 a.m., so everyone in the house was asleep. Coming in the house, I knew my dad was dead asleep because I could hear his snoring. I went upstairs and walked to my room. Alex and Dad's doors were shut, meaning they were both asleep. Anna was asleep in our room, and I threw my phone onto my bed and went to the bathroom to get ready for bed. I shut the bathroom door and started getting dressed for bed and brushing my teeth. As I was finishing up and brushing my hair, I heard a noise from outside the bathroom door in the hallway. This didn't really surprise me, since Alex usually got up in the middle of the night to use the restroom. I went to open the door to tell him I would only be just a second. But before I turned the handle, I stopped. The first noise I heard had been the creaking of the wood flooring in the hallway, but now I heard a different noise. It was breathing. Now that doesn't seem scary in itself, but it wasn't normal breathing. It was heavy, not labored or anything, just heavy. I don't know how to explain it, but there's a difference between the sound of kids breathing and adults breathing when you hear it in dead silence. But the breathing sounded like an adult. I could still hear my dad snoring, so I knew it wasn't him. It couldn't be Alex, that's why I stopped in the first place. That, and as the footsteps moved to the kitchen, they sounded heavy, like a grown man walking around. This was when I started panicking. My first thought was an intruder. There was a sliding back door in the kitchen that led to the backyard, and our fence was by no means unclimbable. I was worried that one of the kids must have left it unlocked when they went to the park behind the house and no one noticed. I knew for sure I locked the front door when I had come in, but since I didn't use it, I hadn't checked the back door. Since it all made sense in my mind, I started panicking even more. I locked the door and held my breath, and I could hear the breathing start to come down the hallway. The creaking of the floorboards signaled how close it was to the bathroom door. I held my breath, frozen in absolute fear. The breathing was heavy and crystal clear, like a man was standing directly to the other side of the door. I was shaking with fear. My dad always locked his door at night, so he couldn't help my siblings. I didn't have my phone on me. It was in my room, on my bed. I didn't have any sort of weapon in the bathroom. I hadn't heard any more movement from the outside door, and the breathing was still there. I slowly and quietly knelt down so I could look under the door. I was looking for feet. I was so scared I could hear my heart beating in my ears. There was nothing. No feet. And suddenly no breathing. The creaking was gone too. I got up, still trying to be quiet, and grabbed my hairbrush. I figured that was the best thing I'd have for a weapon. And I was just going to make a mad dash to my phone in my bed. I held the hairbrush and quietly unlocked the door, then held my breath and listened. Nothing. I whipped the door open and looked up and down the hallway. Nothing. I ran to my room and grabbed my phone and called the boyfriend I had been on a date with hours prior. I even asked him if he had come inside after he dropped me off. I was so sure there had been someone in the house. With him on the phone, I went through and checked the whole house. There was nothing. I checked the back door in the kitchen, and it had been locked. Alex and Anna were sleeping peacefully, and I could tell by Dad's snoring he hadn't woken up either. I went to bed that night with my door locked. The next morning, I told my dad everything that had happened. He could tell that I had genuinely been scared, so he checked everywhere too. Apparently, we had an alarm system too, and it hadn't gone off that night. It wasn't an intruder, or at least not a person. But it was so real and so terrifying that I didn't go visit my dad for a while after that. And it was a few months before I spent the night at that house again. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Paranormal Stories, episode 361. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Before you go, please do hit the like button. And if you'd like early access to the videos, then support me on my Patreon, which is linked in the description. You can do that for as little as $1, or more if you'd like, a month. You'll also find a link to the Hellfreezer merchandise store. And if you especially enjoyed today's video, why not leave a tip? You can click on that little heart with a $sign and leave the tip of your choice. This is never required, but I do appreciate it. Thank you kindly. Alright. Terrible weather I'm having tonight as I'm recording the current batch of stories. So apologies if you hear any wind or kind of rattling sounds in the background. I'm doing my best to pause for them, but it's not always possible. Lights are flickering, so that's great. Let's just hope the power doesn't go out. I mean, we've had weather this bad before and the power hasn't gone out, but it has flickered a bit. So we'll see. Anyway, that's enough grumbling for me. Let's move right along to Hellfreezer's question and answer of the day. And today's question is: when you see those videos pop up on YouTube or wherever else, if it's titled, "Don't click this," because obviously they think, well, I'm very curious as to why you don't want me to click this. I'll do what I want. I'm going to click in that video. Ha 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 ha. I showed you. How many of you actually fall for that? And how many are contrary little shits like me who just refuse and I think, well, okay, don't click it. I guess I won't then. And just move on to something else. Pretty simple one today, so let's move right along to the answer of the day. And this comes from last week's paranormal video. And the question from last week was, what is a tradition passed down to you from your parents that you will always continue? And today's answer comes from Lauren. Insurance, homeowner, and especially car. My dad worked his way up from nothing to solidly middle class. He was afraid of an accident taking it all away. The U.S. being such a litigious place. So from a young age we were taught this aspect, and many others of financial responsibility. I channel my dad all the time, and it serves me well. Thank you very much, Lauren. Okay, and with that, I'm gonna head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.